Make first contact right here.
Hello, and welcome to First Contact with writer Dayton Ward. We are your hosts, Davan and Dave.
Indeed, plain simple tailors.
And your locutors of Trek.
Indeed.
Thanks for joining us tonight, Dayton. We just read your book, your newest book, Pliable Truths.
Indeed.
And
still wanted me on after all of that? That's nice of you. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Especially so after that,
I
gotta say. But before we get into that, we have a little tradition around here.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yes. We like to call sorry, I'm just writing up this banner here and guess Dayton Ward. There we go. I knew I was forgetting something. So, yes, we have a little tradition around here we call the Space Line.
1, 2, 3.
So the space line is where we get our baseline in your Trek fandom.
Okay.
So I'm going to fire 10 rapid fire questions at you, and we'll see where we land. All right.
Okay.
1, favorite show.
Original series. Born and bred.
Favorite episode.
Yeah, it's hard to pick just one, but for purposes
Changes
of
all the time.
we'll go with Arena. So.
Ooh.
Favorite movie.
Again, it changes, but I'm in a motion picture kind of kick right now, so we'll go with that one.
Hold on.
Interesting.
I think after that's Who's Your Captain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's probably going to explain itself. You know what? I'll tell you what. I'm a huge fan of Kirk, but I do admire Picard as a more effective leader. So.
Okay. Favorite character.
I'm going to stick with Picard.
All right.
Right on. Villain?
Making date.
My favorite villain. Man, that's a lot. I don't know that I have a favorite villain. That's a hard one. We'll use the Doomsday Machine. That's an easy one. So.
Ooh. Yeah.
Interesting. Favorite alien species.
We'll go with the Q. They're kind of interesting. There's always a neat story to be found with the Q.
Mm-hmm.
Planet you would most like to visit.
Is Risa the only option? It should be. This should be an easy.
It's so far been the only answer I think of anybody on this quiz.
We've had one non-Risa answer so far.
Okay. Yeah. It's always raining.
It's always an acceptable answer. Yeah. It's always an
acceptable my favorite question on this list now. What is your favorite ship?
You know what? My favorite ship is the original, but I really do love the movie version refit of it. I think that might be the best that ship has ever looked.
I agree. That's a great ship. And the last one, because you're a TOS fan, so you're probably going to get this reference. Biggest Herbert.
My last boss in my last desk job. So, well, wait a minute. You wanted a Trek answer. Oh, okay. Same answer. It applies. So.
Nice.
That works.
Nice.
That's our space line.
That's
indeed.
funny.
Thank you.
Now they're going to scroll those all night long, and
That's right. That's right, folks. Throw your views in the comments. Aspersions away.
That's funny.
Indeed,
thanks,
Sam Higdon. Thank you for reminding us. Happy Father's Day to all those fathers and father-like figures out there.
I appreciate that. Thanks very much.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So, Dayton, Pliable Truths. We should get into that eventually. But I wonder how much detail you do want to get into that when we do discuss Pliable Truths.
Well,
we don't want to drop too many spoilers, eh?
We don't want to do too many spoilers. I've done a couple of these already, and I've managed to spoil it every time. So we'll see if we can buck the trend on this one.
Yeah, right. Let's do that. We're trend buckers.
There you go.
So
well, no. Why don't we buck it this way? First of all, I noted at the end there was a wonderful series of comments with even a couple of footnotes. And as a man who really loves footnotes, I appreciated them. About which book this was in your Star Trek career. Is this number 27 or something like that?
I think it's 25. It's my 25th Star Trek novel, actual, just straight up novel.
Okay.
I've written more Star Trek books, but 25 novels. And some of those are co-written with my writing partner, Kevin Dillmore. I think it used to be about half and half. I think I might have edged out over the last few years because it's been a while since we actually collaborated on a full-blown novel. But yeah, so I've written other novels, but by and large, my first line of my obituary will be writer of way too many Star Trek novels.
This is not possible because
and so did you plan to be a Star Trek writer?
I didn't plan to be a writer of any kind.
Okay.
So my path to writerdom is always a fan of the show. Grew up watching it in the 70s, meaning the original show. Watched everything else first run. Read all the comics, read all the books that were being published at that point in time, which they're a lot more sporadic than they are now. I entered the very first Star Trek Strange New Worlds writing contest, which was a contest for unpublished writers. The company that still is producing Star Trek novels, Simon & Schuster, sponsored this contest and invited those of us who had never written professionally or only had a couple of short stories written professionally to submit a story based on whatever the guidelines that they had established. They were all edited by a top shelf professional editor. We all got contracts. We got paid. We get royalties on the book to this day. So that was my first professional writing credit. And then I did it for the second and third year contests. I repeated, submitted a story and had it picked amongst with those winners. And at that point, I rendered myself ineligible to enter that contest anymore because now I am a, quote, professional writer, unquote.
Right.
The editor at the time, John Ordover, invited me to write a Star Trek novel. He asked if I was interested in doing that. So I had never written anything longer than a short story to be read by anybody else. And so, of course, I said, sure, that sounds like a great idea. What could possibly go wrong? And I have been doing it ever since. That novel came out in 2002, and I have been writing them fairly regularly ever since.
Well, to rewind back to that for a second, if you were putting money on the table, we won't put real money on the table tonight, but if you were putting money on the table, who do you think will win the next Wardy?
You know what? The contest isn't there. There were a couple folks who did it after me, but the contest was suspended after 10 years. And then they did one for the 50th anniversary back in 2016. So unless they revive the contest, I don't see anybody doing that again, unfortunately, because I'm a big champion for the contest. I always was. I was really excited when they brought it back for the 50th. I would love to see it continue in some form. There were a lot of writers whose careers got launched through that contest. Not all of them necessarily stuck with Star Trek, but there are quite a few folks that graduated out of that contest and still have thriving writing careers.
Well, I just how you used to be able to send in scripts to TNG and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was back in that same time period, when they had that open script policy, and you could go and pitch ideas to the writing staff. Definitely a different time frame, and TV shows don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So I never got up the gumption or stones to try to do that. I never really fancied myself a TV or a movie writer, and still don't. I think long form fiction is my comfort zone.
So now, in terms of writing Star Trek novels that way, do you have a sort of episode format in your mind when you're writing, or are you letting yourself run further afield in terms of the narrative possibilities there?
The answer is yes. I'd like to. Some of the books I've done are definitely more episodic in approach. They're meant to evoke that sensibility, particularly if it's an original series novel, which tend to be standalones. And even though they're much longer in terms of story depth or more detailed in terms of story depth and all that, I still think they come across like episodes. And for readers, that's comfort food. They love that. But at the same time, it's always fun to try to stretch and push and see how much you can get away with within the framework. So that led to us doing different types of spin-off novel series that, let us develop our own characters or put them on their own ships and take them on adventures that weren't quite so tightly wound up against the TV canon. And so the answer is yes. It just depends. Sometimes the editor will say, I just want you to do a simple standalone classic original series adventure. What do you got? And in other times it might be a 4 or 5 book miniseries where we all pitch in ideas and try to come up with this major plot and then break it down into the different books. Sometimes it's a serial where, one writer takes the ball and then hands off takes the baton, hands it off at the end of his book to another writer. Any and all, it just depends on what the writer wants and what they think the publisher will back and all that, and what the studios will approve.
Right.
It's been an interesting ride, I'll tell you that.
Well, and it sounds like you've had a lot of experience writing in a whole lot of different ways, solo, with collaborators, with multiple collaborators, with a writing partner. I mean, these all sound like they would be slightly different modalities, but you sound pretty comfortable in all of them so far.
Yeah, I've always been comfortable with the collaboration. I don't have the most important, it's an unofficial rule, but I think it's pretty important, is you have to, check your ego at the door and put your ego behind whatever is best for the project, whether it's your own book, because you're still collaborating. Even if you're a solo writer, you're still collaborating. You're collaborating with your editor, your copywriter, and in the case of a tie-in book like Star Trek, the studio, who has their own people who review and vet and approve everything. So it's definitely collaborative.
Right.
What it means is, it's the division of labor is what is really important when you're working with a co-writer, or you're working on like a trilogy and we're only doing one book and we're working with other writers. So it spreads the workload around, but I think it increases the complexity a little bit, because you're having to, dance in step with each other and not step on everybody's toes, and any other thing I can torture with a metaphor real quick. But it's fun. I mean, if you get the right group of people and everybody's coming at it for the same reasons and with the same idea or the same sensibilities, it's a lot of fun. I have always enjoyed collaborating with other writers, whether we're doing a mini series or something big like a big trilogy or something like that. Having a lot of people, having those folks who have the same kind of track record for doing this for a long time, and they're very familiar with the property, and we're very familiar with each other. We're all friends. We all harass each other. We all we talk trash against each other. So it's easy to work with people like that.
Right on. Right on.
What do you think is the most interesting thing about the Starfleet Corps of Engineers as a group?
I think it's just that they can do anything. They're kind of like the Seabees, or the Army Corps of Engineers. They can give them a can opener and a knife, and they'll build a bridge. Their ingenuity, adaptability, ability to improvise, and figure it out. Figure it out, I think, is probably their unofficial motto. Just figure it out. Or like if you watch Letterkenny, figure it out.
We definitely watched Letterkenny.
So that's what I like about them. That group of characters and those stories were a lot of fun to write, because it was always about how complicated can we make a problem, and then try to make them figure it out. And that series in particular was a lot of fun to write, because there were so many people writing stories for it. And every year we have a convention that a lot of us attend, and it's probably the biggest concentration of Star Trek writers in a single weekend. And we would just toss ideas at each other back and forth across the bar, after hours. Like after the day's convention activities are done, we all go to the bar and we drink until it closes or they kick us out. And we would just throw ideas back and forth. It'd be like poker chips on a table. It's like, just take it and run. That guy, she's good to write that story. He's good for this idea. He was worked great with that character. And it's just back and forth. So many ideas for that series in particular were born out of that silly bar in that hotel. So.
You didn't tell him how long it would really take, did you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's not what we told our editors. We said, yeah, we spent all weekend writing up a pitch and, and all that other kind of stuff, like scribbling on napkins and, whatever else.
That's right. So, who knows how many nachos involved?
Totally expensing this nachos plate because I worked on a story in the bar at 2:00 in the morning. Absolutely.
Did serving in the U.S. Marines inform the way you write Starfleet officers?
I think so. I think there's no way around it. I have a definite established way that I view those types of characters, and even though Starfleet is not as rigid a military organization as like our modern military, there's still those same norms and expectations and leadership structure and adherence to duty and regulations that I think my past lends itself to writing those characters. Not to say that the other writers are incapable of doing that. That's absolutely not true. They're all talented folks. I just think I'm naturally drawn to those characters and can write them that way because I speak that language, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're totally not a pseudo-military at all.
I've had those conversations where people are just so adamant that Starfleet's not the military. I'm like, then show me the other people who fight the war in the episode, because it's always our guys. And but so what I try to explain it is, Starfleet is to our military as our military is the one from the 18th century. It's just the missions have evolved so differently and so drastically, and their reach and their ability to project force and all that stuff is just so different. I mean, it's like night and day, right? We would be like Martians if we dropped a modern aircraft carrier, against the HMS Enterprise. So that's how it would work. The other going the other way. Their missions have evolved, their sensibilities have evolved. They don't rely so much on the actual, all the little nitty gritty and, to be fairly honest, annoying details of military life. They've relaxed a lot of that, but it's still
God bless replicators, eh?
Yes, exactly. Nobody has to wait, 3.5 hours for the armory to open so we can go to the phaser range and do our requals, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think there's some similarities, but it's not fair to just say they're not the military. It's not fair to say they are the military. There's so much more than that. They're a military-esque organization, but yeah, they are definitely a military.
Well, one of the things that really struck me about this book in particular, honestly, was the attention you pay through the sort of various storylines that are interweaving here to like the real material formation and often like military formation of the various characters involved, from those from the detainees to their captors, to the Starfleet people working with it, to the various folks we're going to encounter in and around Bajor or Terok Nor. I really enjoyed the way you build up those characters' perspectives, partially as a cultural thing, but also simply from their sort of organizational formations, right?
Right.
Their logistical perspective, even the way they think about what Deep Space Nine looks like.
Oh, well, like I said, I think I can't escape it. It's ingrained in my DNA. But I appreciate you picking up on that. I do try to write it. So many military folks, veterans and active duty, are fans of Star Trek. It's amazing how many fans are former or present military. So you want to get the details right, because I'm that guy who will totally watch a military movie and yell at the screen about how inaccurate it is. And so I can respect that, and I can so I try to get it right. I don't always get it right, but I do. It's not for lack of trying.
What's your favorite military movie?
Oh man, I'm gonna go way back. I love movies like Stalag 17, The Great Escape, which may have come through in the pages of this particular book, but I also love like The Dirty Dozen and more recent stuff like Platoon or Full Metal Jacket. I laugh at Full Metal Jacket only at the first half, not the second half. I always laugh at those boot camp scenes. Can't get through them without laughing. That guy is so spot on brand. It's ridiculous.
He takes you right back to your own boot camp.
Takes you right there. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them out there that I like.
I'm a Bridge on the River Kwai guy.
That's a good one too. I mean, I love that one. I love older movies in particular. So yeah, I'm not.
I gotta say, for me, it's an odd one, but I gotta say my favorite is Zulu.
Oh wow, I haven't seen that one in forever. But I also like more.
It's just so striking.
I mean, like the recent, not recent anymore. The thing is 20 years old, but Band of Brothers, the miniseries from HBO. I love that. So movies, so stuff in that realm and that vein. I love it. But I mean, I will totally watch Stalag 17. If Turner Classic Movies happens to be putting it on a weekend and I happen across it, I'm done. I'll watch it. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Right on. Who's the greatest master of Kirk Fu other than James T. himself?
You know what? I don't think anybody can measure up to that man. Yeah. I guess we're going into that book now. So he is the man. I mean, as I caution people, don't try this at home. You will totally get your butt kicked. It is not a natural fighting style. What's interesting though is that Shatner apparently had some training in different types of I don't know, I forget what he had. I read something that he had taken some classes in like Aikido and some other disciplines as a, in the service of making his fight scenes look more real on camera, even before Star Trek. And he liked to do his own stunts, so it made sense that he would look good. He would look good on camera. Nobody looks as good as Kirk on camera in a fight. Maybe Finnegan, though. Finnegan might have had his number. So,
yeah, the drop kicks were always good.
I do love those double axe handles.
The one with the pillow that he throws at the guy, though, that was one of my all-time favorites. The one where he just like shakes his arm loose, of the guy. The guy's got his arm and he just shakes his arm really, really, really loud or violently and breaks the hold. I'm like, that is not a move at all. I don't know what that is, but
maybe it is a good style. Maybe somebody should try that out.
Pure enthusiasm at work.
Well. Well, before I get too focused on Pliable Truths, I'm just kind of working my way through some of your canon here. If someone was vacationing through the Klingon Empire, where should they visit? If they got like a weekend, where should they go?
Say that again. Broke up on me a second.
If someone was vacationing to the Klingon Empire, say for a weekend, where should they go?
Oh man. I think if it was me, I'd want to tour like sites of old battlefields. So like I'd want to see all of that stuff, the internal squabbling and things like that. I'm blanking on names right now, but I had a whole sequence.
The site of Raktakel Bracht.
Yeah, that one. There was a couple of them in there that I like. I mean, because like when we ever go on vacation, if we take a road trip, I'm always looking for where are we going in relation to like Gettysburg or some other battlefield that I've never been to. Oh, we're going to be because like this summer the convention that I go to normally in Baltimore, they've moved it to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and that's not very far from Gettysburg. So I'm like, well, we're going there because I've never been, that kind of thing. So. Nice. My wife and kids are like, well, we'll go to the mall. Or we'll go get our hair done that day or something. No, okay, they'll go with me.
Well, same question for Vulcan, because there's probably not many battlefields.
Oh.
Ooh. I'd probably want to visit. I wrote a couple of places that had, even though it's a desert planet, apparently it does have a couple of oceans. So I would like to see that and see if it's for real. And then, of course, you want to see Mount Salea and you want to see those kind of things.
They're always like a couple of small seas. It's like, well, where? We've been sitting around.
I'm like, you never see them on
for a while.
Yeah.
Where are they?
But I mean, they made a canon reference to it, so that's why I included it.
Yeah.
Those books were very challenging because once I found everything that I had that was canonically established about Vulcan, I still had to write, the other 95 pages for the book of the 100 pages. So it was just like, all right, we're going to make stuff up. So I started digging around in all kinds of places. There are references to stuff from the novels, different role-playing games, comics. If I could find something to make a case for it, I put it in there. And then there's other stuff where I just made up whole cloth. I'm like, no, nobody knows. We've never been there. We'll find out.
There, in fact, are 3 seas.
Yeah. 200 years, somebody will go, well, we went to Vulcan and none of this stuff is here. That Ward guy was a liar. I won't be
there. Okay, well, on that tour guide book train, what other empire or planet would you like to tour?
Man, I guess we probably should go to Romulus, right? Before it blows up.
That's true.
It's very gray.
Yeah.
Limited time.
Even the Romulan heart is gray.
As far as because I get asked all the time, am I going to do any more of those? I'm like, well, it's not my decision. It's the publishers. And to be fair, once you get past Vulcan and the Klingon Empire, the list of planets that have a lot of information about them and it would be interesting to a wider audience is very short. So I could see a book with multiple planets, like a tour of Federation worlds or something, maybe being a better sell than just like a book about Andor or a book about Bajor. But I did volunteer to do the Risa tour guide if they would let me expense all my trips to the Bahamas and Fiji and places like that. They didn't take up my.
You have to source the material.
Yeah. Well, you have to write what you know, I suppose. That's
and you want to lend it an air of authenticity, but they didn't go for my sales pitch. So
unbelievable.
Or the fool they. So.
That's true. It's true.
Tour the torrential.
The real trouble is sourcing an What are those guys? Maharjaron guys.
Yeah. No, Jamaharon.
Jamaharon, that's
the
what
ritual.
Yeah, Jamaharon.
Okay, and the Horgon, right? So,
Yes.
That's right.
Well.
Oh my goodness.
All right. Well, I don't know if I can.
A tragic vacation for Picard, the Horgon.
So I
mean, honestly, one of the funniest scenes in TNG is him arguing with that Ferengi about the Horgon.
Right. Yeah. That is.
Sorry, I talked over you there, Davan. Go ahead.
No worries. I'm trying to speak in around baby crying. So, well, hopefully you guys can't hear that too loudly. Oh, yeah. Well, one thing I loved about Pliable Truths is there are character interactions that I like. I don't know if I want to say desperately, but desperately. How many characters should we talk about that are in this?
Well, I mean, I guess I should set the stage a little bit. The reason the book is set where it is because after doing all the books that were after the movies and all of the different continuity that we had, had to put to bed because of the Picard series, I had done a Discovery novel, which was kind of a standalone one and done book. And then they asked me to write a Next Generation novel, but they specifically asked for it to be set during the TV series. And then they said, we would like you to do a crossover with DS9. And I said, well, that's kind of problematic because there's only about a year and a half or so between when DS9 starts and when Next Gen ends. And then, of course, the Enterprise gets destroyed in the movie. Spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen Generations, released 30 years ago this November.
You let the cat out of the bag on that
one. So once I started figuring out where the degree of overlap and what was interesting, and another problem was Worf apparently did not meet anybody from DS9 until he transferred to DS9 in that show's 4th season. So, because there's a whole series of intros where he's being introduced to Kira and other characters on this. He definitely hadn't seen any of the Starfleet crew. And so, now all of a sudden the perimeter is shrinking. It's like, well, okay, now what am I going to do? So anything that I was going to do, I had to find something constructive for Worf to do that would not violate the canon as far as who knew who. So that began the process of spinning out the prison camp story that's in the book, because I needed a B story for certain characters to be able to go do. And then I realized, well, I could, it's very close. DS9's premiere is very close, not very long at all after Next Gen's episode with Picard being tortured by Gul Madred. There's only it's a very short window of time, if you go by the star dates. So I'm like, well, he would still be raw from that if I set it, on the station just as the occupation is ending, but before any of the Starfleet characters that from the show get there. This would be an opportunity to figure out, or to explore why O'Brien chose to change duty stations or duty assignments. And what kind of effect that might have on his family. And as a guy who had to go through that, with my own wife and transferring from station to station and the stress that puts on your marriage, I thought that was an interesting storyline to follow up on. So those things just started kind of unspinning on their own. And then once I realized that, I would be able to use this as a bit of a therapeutic treatment for Picard as he's dealing with his trauma from Madrid, but yet he's still Starfleet's point man for going through these very delicate negotiations. Then it all started to fall into place. In fact, it was my editor who suggested that I have at least a scene with Picard and Kaiopaka from DS9. That was her idea. And I thought, well, that's a great idea. There's a little bit of wiggle room with respect to how the show portrays her, but she bought off on it, and so did Paramount. So that's why those two get together a couple times in the book.
Opaka.
Those were I really enjoyed those scenes. Honestly.
Yeah, she has some nice sass in this one.
Yeah.
I figure she deserves it. They definitely rate or warrant some sass, right? Considering how raw the wounds are at that point. I think they're all sass.
And she was kind of done dirty. They just left her on that planet and never talked about her again.
Yeah.
We don't need to get into that.
Although I did want to say, you mentioned the fact of Worf not having met other characters from DS9 before his arrival in the series. As soon as he started talking in the first moment where he's there, I thought, oh gosh, what are you going to do with this? And then the way you handled it, I really, really enjoyed, because it's almost like a character speaking at a turn, but it's because it's a side of Worf that we don't necessarily get to see, which is him being a really empathetic Starfleet officer. I really liked that moment of him. It's like, this is really consistent with where he is in TNG at that point, and his character development and everything.
Thank you. That's what I was hoping that people would pick up on. It's like, at this point, it's the 6th season of the show, and Worf has been under Picard's command for that entire time, and he's grown as a character, not nearly as much as we're going to see in DS9, but even at the point in this point in TNG, he's grown from being just the guy at the back of the bridge, and now he's a trusted confidant. We saw that bond deepen during the deal where he was, discommendation. He went through discommendation on his own planet, and Picard was standing right there when he took the hit. And he has learned how to be a more effective leader by watching and observing Picard. And I think there's a part of him that never wants to disappoint Picard. And I think that eventually boils over when we get to like First Contact, and the guy's like, if you were anybody else, I'd kill you right here, it's like the level of respect that he commands, no pun intended, from Worf at that point, is a culmination of how he grew throughout the series. And so I'm glad you picked up on that. I was hoping you would pick up on that the idea.
Well, I was really thinking, like Farpoint Worf would not be that guy.
No, he'd shoot.
He's like, well, of course I'm going to go down the road.
Recommend we fire phasers.
I just remember exactly. What is it? Do you intend to blow a hole in the viewer? No. Well, then put your face away. But by that point, it's like he's learned. He's learned by Picard's example that there's another way to do something, and the fact that he, like you said, and I think that continues on in Next Gen, like the following season when he kind of mentors Sito Jaxa, at the Lower Decks character, and how he comes across with the way he teaches her to stand up for herself. You never see that coming. That's like a complete left hook that you did not expect, a sucker punch. I'm like,
oh, it's such a great episode. Yeah.
He wouldn't have done that if he hadn't been working, serving under Picard all that time, at least in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
He's such a cool character. I mean, watching his evolution and then the way it culminates in Picard season 3 is just, you can track it all the way. And it's like, well, Picard's been there every time something a major evolution in his character, Picard is somewhere in the mix.
It's true. So. I have made chamomile tea.
And even right up to sleeping on the bridge at the end, it's like, that's perfect.
Oh, yeah.
So
so
I have earned the break. So.
Well, DS9 is like my favorite thing ever, and Chain of Command.
It's like
my second favorite thing ever. So
it's a great series.
This novel blew my mind.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I mean, I am a diehard, born and bred, will die taking it to my grave original series fan.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe that DS9 is arguably the best Star Trek series ever written, pound for pound.
I say greatest.
I mean, it's the scripts, the characters, the plot lines, the themes, the arcs of the characters. It's just pound for pound.
The acting's top notch.
The acting is top notch. The people that they got to be on that, the cast is complete. I mean, the range of that cast is insane. Mad props to DS9 and everybody involved in it, because it was something else.
So then I'm like, I'm getting into this. I'm like, oh, this is like DS9 and Chain of Command and. Garrick's here. That's not a spoiler. He's on the cover. It's like this is everything I've ever wanted. And like, no, this is good stuff.
I'm a little irritated that I didn't get I couldn't come up with a real good reason to put Picard and Garrick together. So once they showed me the cover, I was like, they never have a scene together. In my original outline, I had a scene with them, and my editor was like, nah, they wouldn't trust him to be near Picard at this point. It's too early. You're thinking later, Garrick, from the later on in DS9. I'm like, you know what, you're right. I let myself.
Funny though, I didn't miss that though. I didn't miss it.
I didn't pick up on it.
There were other character interactions that were more important to me than Picard.
That's fair.
And you got all of those.
Oh, okay.
And some, of course, were big surprises, and it's like,
well, like for instance, give me a for instance.
Well, I mean,
spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't read the book.
Spoiler alert. Everything
Well,
around Gulmadred, I gasped when Gulmadred walked into the room, because I was thinking what you were thinking. I'm like, this is too soon for Picard, for him to come walking into that room. That's.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, everything that happens from there on, I was just riveted. Just yeah.
I mean, it seems kind of obvious that I would do that. What I was more surprised about is what they let me do with the character. I didn't expect them to let me do what they let me do, but I mean, it just seemed natural. Like, to me, it's like, what would the Cardassian Union, being embarrassed by having to just pull out, which was not the military's idea, it was the civilian government's idea, and their tails are tucked between their legs. Jellicoe had just whipped them, right, in chain of command, so they are not happy at all. How would they stick it to Starfleet? Picard's going to be the mediator. We'll send the guy that's screwed with him, and then we'll see how it plays out. That's totally on brand for the Cardassians at this point in time. I don't know. It just seemed like an obvious. I figured people would see it coming, but apparently I managed to disguise it enough. Lucky me, I guess. I'm usually not that deft.
But any more Garrick and Ducat is good stuff for me. I would take.
Them just sniping at each other is just. I'll just get some popcorn and snack while they do it.
I really I like I think the Madred Garrick conversation was one of my favorite bits in the book.
That one too.
I was
trying not to spoil that one, but
that's okay. I mean, he's in
that. That too. I was like, they must know each other. They know each other. Oh, yes.
But it was a good note on my editor's part, because she was right. When I was writing the Garrick bits in the outline, I was thinking more about him as he evolved over the course of DS9 and not how he is at the beginning. Like, he has no trust. He hasn't earned anything from anybody. And I was using him in a way that was more consistent with later Garrick. And she was right to call me out for that. So then I had to do some reworking. I'm like, well, let's see, what can I do? Well, I can channel that all into a conversation with Madred or with this character or that character. So, but Garrick is so much fun to write. He is such a complex character. I don't know that I did him complete justice compared to somebody like, Una McCormick or somebody, but
Andy Robinson wrote a pretty good Garrick.
He did I tell you what, that book is, and a lot of people seem to think that, he didn't do the work. I'm like, no, he absolutely did the work. He did it all himself. He did not have a ghostwriter. He didn't have a co-writer. He wrote that himself.
Well, I heard it was from his notes that he took to just get into character.
He had been giving himself notes over the years of how to give his character backstory and how to inform certain scenes. Like when he was, when he wanted to have a scene where he's getting emotional about his family, he had something he could pull on. And then, when he pitched this idea to Pocketbooks, because Armin Shimmerman had already done a novel with one of the actual Star Trek novelists, David R. George. And they had partnered together on a Quark story. So the idea that an actor from the show might be interested in writing a novel was not unheard of. It just wasn't done very often. Normally these folks are too busy for this kind of work, and the money involved is ridiculous compared to what they make working on TV. It's like, it's almost embarrassing. It's like
Shatner wrote a few, I think.
Yeah, he had a few, but he probably got a better deal than I do. And then, but I mean, like, there have been writers, like, especially, like if there's a strike on or something, like, well, hey, I could write a Star Trek novel during the strike. It's like, what I could pay you, you get more to turn on your computer in the writer's room at a TV show. So it's nobody gets rich writing Star Trek novels. You definitely want to do it largely for the love. I mean, it's good work, but it's, I'm like I said, it'll be the first line of my epitaph, but it's definitely not going to make me rich. So. But I do enjoy doing it. I'll keep it up until they kick me out of the boat.
Is there like a built-in, like, pretty consistent, like, audience base for these Star Trek novels that you can pretty much count on, like a certain number? They're like, well, a Star Trek novel does this, and
I'm sure there is.
If it's really good, and like,
I'm sure there is. I'm sure for the most part, there is a core. I believe there is a core group of fans who are very supportive and always have been. And then, certain books might attract notice beyond that group because of, like if Andy Robinson writes a book about Garrick, that's going to attract attention, or William Shatner is going to write a book about resurrecting Kirk. That's definitely going to get some eyeballs. But yeah, I think for the most part, the Star Trek line is supported by and large by a very dedicated fan base. And, we try not to take that for granted. They're very loyal. They've been very faithful. They can be very vocal with their support. They can be very damning with their, with their complaints, but it's not unearned. It's like, you paid for it. You took the time to write it. You are entitled to your opinion, good or bad. I don't have a problem with it. Sometimes I learn something and figure out maybe I'll do better next time, that kind of thing. So I try to keep that in mind when I'm doing one of these things. Oh, hello. Yeah. We have
some of our co-pilots.
Life intervenes. Oh, hello. Enterprise.
Very good. Yeah. Don't throw that down. Dad will be upset. There you go.
He's up all about spaceships right now.
Train him up young.
Should both be in bed.
That's right.
But,
I mean, there are moments when a giant hand has grabbed the Enterprise before. So
it's true. Yeah. Go put on a green glove, honey. No.
Go put on your green hand.
Yeah. And I love all the build up too to like kind of explain how O'Brien got to where he was in TNG to where he got in DS9. I think that was a lot of important character building and just groundwork for like building. It's like your novel makes that transition a lot more enjoyable. Like if someone's watching TNG or DS9 for the first time, I would drop this novel in between.
Well, thank you. That was the goal, was to make it feel like the episode that you missed. Like, wait a minute, that's kind of where I was gunning for. The O'Brien thing in particular really intrigued me because they just really didn't explain it. And it's like, wait a minute, all he's done is stand in a transporter console for 5 years. And that's not even consistent with how he was originally portrayed, because he's in the pilot. He's in Farpoint. And he's wearing a red uniform. And he bounces around, he's almost like the Mr. Leslie of the original series. He's like showing up in all these different places. But they finally settled down and made him a transporter guy. But I'm like, officers, again, this is my military thinking. It's like officers don't just stand around doing that kind of work. So luckily and thankfully they were real loose about it. They never really gave him a rank in Next Gen, but they made him an enlisted guy when he moved over to DS9. I'm like, that's perfect. He's a senior enlisted guy. This is absolutely the guy who will get his hands dirty, grab a wrench, get under the floor, fix it, right? And so that was fun to kind of tease out that idea that O'Brien was a lead from the front kind of senior enlisted guy that didn't mind getting his uniform dirty or putting in long hours. As long, he would not put somebody to work on a job like that if he was not already in the trench. So I'm like, I can relate to that. That's a great mindset for a guy like O'Brien, and it made the transition make more sense in my head.
Now, does that reflect your own service? Were you an enlisted man in the Marines?
Yeah.
Or were you among the officers? Okay.
No, I was an enlisted guy. And my leadership philosophy has always been, from the front, by example. Even when I left the service and moved into a corporate role, I was a technical lead in software, and I was the first guy in, last guy out. If anybody was working overtime or had to go in on a call, I went into. It's just that's how I led people. It's like you don't make somebody do something you're not willing to do yourself, and or you don't just give over the crap jobs to your subordinates. You gotta eat that with them. That's how you foster loyalty and get better work out of your people.
Right. I found that a really strong part of the characterization, particularly of Panat. And he's honestly, I think, probably of all the characters that I read in the book, he's the one who's going to stay with me the longest.
Okay.
Because I mean, honestly, and again, this may be a little spoilery, but the way you opened the book was, I mean, in some ways, it felt to me like a really great cold open of a Star Trek episode, but also it felt so stark in light both of what were clearly sort of motifs drawn from things like The Great Escape or stuff like that, but also more contemporary events, right? Like the whole sense of the discipline required to be operating in such a strategically restrictive environment as that camp,
right?
And the extraordinary solidarity and planning and intensive work that went into just having a malfunction go right,
Yeah.
was Yeah, it really struck me as yeah, a lovely way to bring us right down to the ground of occupation, right off the bat. Like, here's where we're actually starting from. We're not just after it, we're actually still in the minute of it.
Right.
And now we've got to transition out. But yeah, was that you said that storyline sort of more came out of figuring out what to do with Worf. So how does that end up being the way you decide to open the novel?
I mean, I knew I was going to have the prison camp element.
Okay.
But originally, it was going to be on Bajor, but then I realized it makes more sense to set it elsewhere, and that in turn lended itself to, okay, now I can send the Enterprise with Worf and whoever else I decide needs to go on that mission. Right. But as far as the setup, if I have a habit with Star Trek novels, and I'm sure I have several of them, but one of them is I like to open cold.
Okay.
I open from the non-main character point of view, something not on the bridge of the Enterprise, not opening like an episode. So I tend to do that a lot. I think that's just my preferred way of doing it. Right, I like to set the stakes, at least try to set the stakes or establish the stakes somehow early on. That might be it might be a holdover from when I wrote short stories where my editor was like, you've got to grab them in the first paragraph, ideally the first sentence. If I've turned the page and I have no idea what you're writing about, you've lost me. And so I just expanded that a little bit for I like, okay, I've got maybe the first chapter to figure out where I'm at with this stuff. But I love and plus I'm just a fan of the cold open. I'm like, just throw the audience into the deep water and then we'll figure it out, or throw them into the action and then pull back and we'll explain it. As far as the camp characters, we knew about the Bajoran resistance. We knew that they were organized into cells, and we knew that they were very patient and pragmatic, and they would wait, they would play the long game and wait for their moment. We knew that from DS9, so it's not like I created that I was just piggybacking off new. But and then figuring out how to apply it to this situation that I'd established. But we already knew that they were capable of this kind of patience and dedication to a cause. This was just a way of illustrating it and establishing my guest characters really fast. So,
right. Well, it's a lovely device, that's for sure.
Thank you.
And I'm a Keiko fan, and it's nice to see her get things to do.
Yeah. I mean, being a military spouse is a thankless task a lot of times. And so having experienced that firsthand and, what they have to put up with in terms of what they sacrifice and what they give up, not just when, the service member deploys, but just the day-to-day stuff. My wife put off getting her college degree by several years because she elected to stay married to me and move around with me, so she would have to withdraw and start over. And and then she's got to find a job, and then she gets happy with a job, and I got orders, we got to go again, and so there was definitely some strain there, and that is not a unique set of circumstances or experience. I mean, that happens to every service member who's married and has a family. So I wanted to channel a little bit of that and show that these decisions are not made unilaterally or by the person most impacted. They're going to affect the family, so they deserve to have a voice in the conversation. So and plus and it giving her something to do as far as one of the plot lines, where I team her up with Crusher and a player to be named later. We don't want to spoil too much. It was just it seemed like it fit her skill set. It's like she has this background, why not use her? So it's like, whoa, this is one of the few times we actually get to see her do what she trained to do. Put her to work. So
yeah.
Well,
plus I don't have the excuse of being like, well, it's only a 45-minute show. I can only show the big, type alpha male characters. I have this entire cast of rich characters that I have to play with and give them agency. So I don't get to hide behind the time limit, of the TV show or whatever the structure of the show is. I've had a similar conversation when it comes to writing characters like Uhura. On the original series, she's kind of one note, but in the back of my brain, she's an officer, she's a department head. She's obviously very intelligent and very accomplished, and she has a skill set, both technical and otherwise. She must be a leader of some kind because every officer is a leader. But you never see that except very rarely on the original show. There were a couple of really good moments that she had, but then the 2009 movie comes along and they establish her with all these skill sets that you never see. She's an ace at translation. She recognizes languages and dialects. She does all these things, and now we no longer have that excuse. If we ever had it before, we certainly don't have it now. When we portray the character in the books, give her that agency, give her that competency, give her that, let her be able to take the initiative and do things, making her a more fully realized, fully fleshed character. And I love it that Strange New Worlds, I was kind of hesitant at first when I heard they were going to bring her in, but I love what they've done with her. They've shown her as the officer we're going to meet later, that she has this underlying skill set and abilities and technical expertise and leadership capability that you're not going to get to see. And the only reason you're not going to see it is because that's just not how they film TV in the 60s. If they film that show, you get to see all that stuff. But so that helps me as a writer to have more fun with these things. It's like, okay, I wanted to emulate an episode, but I'm not going to be trapped by the strictures of how they wrote TV 50 years ago.
Well, I suppose that's the beautiful yes and of doing it as a novel too.
Yeah,
you can sort of get. I
got more room to play than they do. Yeah, obviously that's I have more room and I can get in their head and I can approach things from their point of view, and yeah, definitely spoiled compared to like a TV writer who's got a lot more to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, I think what is it? Celia Rose Gooding, I think her name is.
She's absolutely fabulous. She's
most iconic version of that character, just because they give her so much more to do than they ever gave Nichelle Nichols.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking back, like I said, the only reason that Nichelle Nichols didn't get more time to shine is because that's just not how they made TV back in those days. It's a sorry excuse, but that's the reality. It
is the truth of the.
It is the truth.
Yeah.
So if they had to do it over again, they would certainly do it more like what we're seeing now. At least I'd like to think they would.
Yeah.
Like it's like every time they go down to a planet and she's like, "Captain, I'm frightened." I'm like, "What is she doing here?
She can totally kick his ass," or whatever.
Exactly. He's like, "She's a Starfleet officer. Why is she frightened?" I was like, it never made any sense to me. But I didn't grow up in the 60s.
I don't get me wrong. I like I said, I grew up with the original show. It's near and dear to my heart, but I still recognize its flaws. It's like, yes, it was pretty forward thinking, but they could have done they could have done better.
Sure. But you start from where you are, right?
But the sensibilities of the day didn't really lend itself to pointing out those kinds of things the way they would today, so
sure.
I'm glad to see the character getting, and I mean, I tell you what, just to follow this thread a little bit further, my two favorite characters from Strange New Worlds are Dr. Mabenga and Nurse Chapel. The backstory they gave those two characters is phenomenal. I mean, I was blown away. I was just like, this is great. Now I can't look at Christine Chapel in the original series anymore and not see that backstory. I can look past the trappings of the day and how they filmed her and how they used her character in the original show and know that there's a deeper character back there. They just didn't show us that in the original show. So that's how I fix it in my head anyway.
100%, Mbenga's my favorite on that show.
I had no idea going in that was going to go that way. I was like, really? I mean, we're loading up this cast with a bunch of characters we know can't die, or at least we think we know they can't die. They're protected by the plot armor, but holy hell, you did what? You put them in a MASH type episode and they've got PTSD and a war. I'm like, okay, I'm in. You sold me.
Under the Cloak of War is such a good episode.
It's such a great episode.
Oh, man.
Look, I think all chaos is broken out upstairs, so I should probably Father's Day,
Father's Day never
ends. The hullabaloo. It's true, man.
It's true.
All right.
Look, everyone has to go.
Thanks so much for joining
read
us.
Pliable Truths.
Thank you. I didn't know what to expect, but I hope it worked for y'all.
So.
I hope you enjoyed it. And
I did enjoy it.
As Michael Palin once said, if you enjoyed it only half as much as we did, then we've enjoyed it twice as much as you.
I mean, I do a lot of these when a book comes out. I get a lot of requests for interviews, and a lot of them are people I've done it with before. And so it's like we get through the formalities of, well, okay, let's talk about the new book, and then we talk about whatever else springs up. So but I've never talked with you gents before, so this was a lot of fun. Not that those other ones aren't fun, but it's nice to talk to
the kids.
Yeah. Hey, bring your kids on next time. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All the co-pilots. All right.
Lots of co-pilots on this crew. All right. Well, thanks a lot again, Dayton.
Yeah.
We'll get out of here for now, and everyone go check out Pliable Truths, and I look forward to your next book.
Indeed.
Thank you. I have no idea what it'll be. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Oh, well.
All right.
See you, everybody.
And transmission.